Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce the next session. It's going to be on business in South Asia, opportunities and challenges. And with us on this panel, we have 5 distinguished gentlemen in their own respect. And may I invite Mr. S Chandra, Managing Director, Noor Investment and Trading Private Limited, and non-resident High Commissioner of Singapore to Sri Lanka on stage to chair the session, please. Mr. Das, thank you. I would also like to invite the following panelists: Mr. Jonathan Yap, President, CapitaLand Financial and CapitaLand Group, Singapore; Mr. Enayetullah Khan, Chairman of Cosmos Foundation, Bangladesh; Mr. Pang Yee Ean, Director General, Asian Infrastructure and Investment Bank; and last not but least, Dr. Amitendu Palit, Senior Research Fellow, Institute of South Asian Studies. I shall now ask Mr. Das to chair the session. Thank you, Mr.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this first session, plenary session, Business in South Asia, Challenges and Opportunities. To take us through this morning, we have 4 panel members, very distinguished members: Mr. Jonathan Tao, President, CapitaLand; Mr. Khan, Founder, Managing Director of Cosmos Foundation; Mr. Amitendu Palit, Senior Research Fellow; and Mr. Pang Yee Ean, Director General, ASEAN Infrastructure Investment. I think their biodata is in your conference kit, and I do not propose to go over it, except to say that they bring with them deep knowledge and rich experience in South Asia to this conference. To kick off, let me say that the popular perception about South Asia is that it is one of the most difficult regions in the world for doing business. That's a popular perception. At the same time, it can also be stated that South Asian countries are working hard to improve doing business conditions. In the World Bank ratings for Ease of Doing Business Index, India and Pakistan have improved their rankings considerably. So has Sri Lanka, Bhutan, and Nepal. Bangladesh, Afghanistan, and Maldives are continuing their efforts to bring down the cost of doing business. While active reforms are being implemented, problems continue to plague. I'm sure our distinguished panel members here will dive deep into this. On this note, let me invite Mr. Jonathan Tao to address you.
Thank you, Mr. Das. Hi, morning, everybody. I'm Jonathan Yap. I'm from CapitaLand. We are a real estate firm, so obviously our interests will be largely urbanization related. Our interest in South Asia is entirely in India as of now. And we've been in India for about 25 years, about the same time that we've been in China, as well as Vietnam, which are the other 2 major markets that were in Asia where we've been for quite a while. In India, we operate a portfolio of business parks, logistics centers as well. And currently it's one of the key markets that we like a lot, but we probably hope to do a lot more. Group-wide, we have about 130 billion Sing dollars of real estate asset under management. India, while it's a key market, is less than 3% currently, just about 3.3 billion Sing dollars. We hope to double it over the next 5 years. Not that we don't want to do more, but I guess it is a market that obviously is full of challenges, while it's as much as it presents many opportunities. So I guess the obvious challenges people are aware, it is the world's largest democracy. So with that, it comes with its own set of peculiarities, whether it's policy making, enforcement, and so on. But at the same time, we are also lured by the many opportunities that India presented us and is still presenting us. It has got a very strong, large economy, third largest in Asia. It has a big workforce, well educated. Just to give you some sense, our business, our investment is largely in business parks as of now. And we have many foreign companies that have operations in our park. So if we compare with US, which is one of the major countries where many of our customers are from, a IT engineer in US, his cost is equivalent to about almost 11 IT engineers in India. That probably very quickly put into context why you have so many foreign firms setting up operations in India to do work in a very cost-effective and of good quality manner. In fact, many of the movies that you see lately, the animation is done in the parks that we operate in either Bangalore or Hyderabad. Now, other than Bangalore and Hyderabad, we also have operations in Chennai, Pune, Mumbai, and Gurgaon. So these are the 6 markets that we're focusing largely right now. And other than the workforce, obviously, we're also excited by the size of the market. Being big obviously present many opportunities for us to grow. And this is obviously a market we'll continue to focus on as much as we'll continue to focus on many other markets. With that, I'll hand back to Mr. Das.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. May I ask Mr. Khan to...
Good morning. Allow me to begin by saying thank you to Ambassador Pillai, the chairman of ISAS. Cosmos Foundation has a collaborative history with ISAS. Cosmos Foundation is the philanthropic arm of Cosmos Group, headquartered in Bangladesh. Today's theme is challenges and opportunities in Bangladesh, for me to say to the audience. I would start with the opportunities and then the challenges. Bangladesh is the 8th largest country population-wise, and when people say that Bangladesh is a small country, I kind of think that they are absolutely wrong. We have the longest sand beach in the world. We have the largest mangrove forest in the world. Bay of Bengal is the biggest bay in the world. And what else? We are the biggest delta bay, and I think a nation of 165 million people, I think there's no other country which is as homogeneous as Bangladesh, both linguistically and culturally. It's a secular country with 85% of majority Muslim. There is a very peaceful political situation currently, and we have attracted only $3 billion last year, but we hope that the number will grow. We have bilateral relationship with all the major developed countries in the world, and especially now with China's growing power, we have about almost, I would just throw this number, about $31 billion investment from only China in our infrastructure. Oil and gas, with the solution of our maritime boundary line, Bangladesh is now poised to go for offshore drilling. There are at least 8 international oil companies who are drilling onshore and offshore, but we are going to go for a roadshow for offshore. There has been going to be a 3D seismic for the offshore. And as you know, the energy plays a big role, so Bangladesh is doing quite well. And another is our democratic dividend, demographic edge, the young population who are really driving this growth, which is between 7 to 8%. And it is not the official figure, but it's the figure that is endorsed by the World Bank and Asian Development Bank. Now, we also have a newly structured Bangladesh Investment Development Authority, BIDA, under the Office of Prime Minister. So investments are serious issues, and our Prime Minister has, in fact, she's heading the BIDA, the Board of Investment. And when it comes to challenges, I think there are two issues. One is the governance issue, and the second is the climate change challenges. I would start with the climate change challenges, and I think Bangladesh is doing fairly well, being one of the most vulnerable countries in the world from climate change point of view. We have been able to evolve a very early warning system for the coastal areas and for other islands to warn them in advance for the any kind of cyclone or flood. And flood has been a kind of a mixed blessing. It brings a lot of nutrients from the Himalayas, and we are having 3 crops a year. So we are self-sufficient in food. And then when it comes to challenges, as I said, governance, I think, is a big issue in most of the countries. Bangladesh is not an exception, but there are civil society organizations who, and the media is also very vibrant in Bangladesh. We have private sector, electronic media, radio, television, news agencies. In fact, my background is media, so I can say that we have the freedom in Bangladesh. And of course, you have to, in this age of what I say, a fast-changing, fast-shifting media ecology, I think Bangladesh is quite in advanced stage. We did the leapfrogging, the social media, and in this age of social media, you can't hide anything. So Bangladesh is also very much in the IT game, and our exports are, we are the world apparel capital. We're going to surpass China, and we will be the #1 in apparel business. Bangladeshi workers are very trainable. And very, very, I would say, EDB of Singapore have ranked Bangladeshi workers as the most productive labor force in Singapore. So I think, and I will end by saying that as a media hat, when I wore the media hat and I had the chance to interview Mr. Pang Yee, the foreign minister of China, and he was talking a little bit more about India. So I had to intervene. I said that, where does Bangladesh fit in? And he smiled and looked at me and said that Bangladesh could be the bridge between India and China. And truly, I believe so, that Bangladesh can benefit from these 2 economic giants. And I will be ready to answer any question from the audience. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. May I now invite Dr. Palit?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Let me try to add on to what my previous panelists mentioned and take a bit of a broad picture regional perspective in getting to the issue of opportunities and challenges for South Asia. I'll highlight 2 sets of opportunities. The first is the set of opportunities that are coming out from efforts taken by countries themselves. And the second is the set of opportunities that are arising from developments around South Asia. Now, when it comes to efforts being taken by South Asian countries themselves, I think many of us don't realize the fact that over the last 3 years, and in terms of the parameters that are laid out for improvement in doing business, practically all South Asian countries have performed quite well. We tend to talk more about India, which is now ranked in number 63 in the ease of doing business. But along with India, there are 3 other South Asian countries, Bhutan, Nepal, and Sri Lanka, which are all now within the top 100. And the other large economy of the region, Pakistan, has also made fairly significant improvement when it comes to ease of doing business. And there are certain parameters where these countries, interestingly, seem to be almost working together in registering improvements. Say, for example, the ease in starting a business, which in South Asia is now at an average of 14 days, and which is actually much better than the global average of 20 days. But there are areas of underperformance for sure, and those continue to remain the old problem areas like registering property, enforcing contacts. But it's also interesting and heartening to note that there are improvements that are taking place in parameters which were almost given up for the region, like, say, for example, trading across borders. And there are very interesting trade facilitation examples that are coming up from the region, like, say, for example, when one looks at, some of you might be familiar with a place called Birganj, which is located on the India-Nepal border and which is one of the regional examples of integrated checkposts aiming at very quick clearance across the borders. And India has tried to bring in systems of post-clearance audit and electronic submission for improving trade facilitation. So all in all, the point that I would like to make is that among these South Asian countries, there is an effort to bring down the cost of doing business. And this is not an isolated effort. This is being witnessed across the region, which is a good factor to start off with. And this, if looked at in conjunction with the second opportunity that I would like to reflect on, which is happening around the region, that is the burst in connectivity. Now, when we refer to connectivity around South Asia, we normally tend to refer to connectivity from a big picture perspective, let us say the Belt and Road Initiative, for example, led by China. But we don't tend to give as much attention to the connectivity that's actually coming up on the periphery of the region through efforts by the South Asian countries themselves or in collaboration with other regional partners. So I take this opportunity to bring to your attention the Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal initiative, BBIN, which in fact has had this very impressive regulatory development in terms of a motor vehicles agreement, which now allow both countries to bring in vehicles from both sides, offload and download cargo on one single trip and go back, which is something which the region has been wanting to do for a number of years, hasn't been particularly successful. One hopes that this will actually get translated into a template, into a bigger cross-regional relationship, like, say, for example, the BIMSTEC, which involves South Asian countries with Southeast Asian countries, and would also bring in positive bursts of connectivity. And this is not just limited to land connectivity or transport connectivity. There are interesting movements that are taking place in the area of water connectivity through efforts to explore coastal shipping. There are interesting efforts that have already taken place in air connectivity. We talk about open skies with respect to Southeast Asia, but many of us tend to overlook the fact that Thailand and India have actually emerged as regional hubs when it comes to civil aviation, enabling a large number of connections to flow in between each other. So when one looks at connectivity in combination with the fact that ease of doing business is improving across South Asian countries, I think we can safely conclude that this actually creates a holistic situation where the cost of business as a whole is going down, people-to-people movements are taking place, and this positions the region quite well for taking advantage of a lot of developments which are apparently disruptive but can work to the opportunity and benefit of the region in the long term, like, say, for example, the supply chain relocations arising out of the US-China trade war and a few other trade-related developments. Now, on this now, having left it at that, let me just shift to a couple of challenges which I think are still important for the region to encounter. Mr. Khan reflected on the issues that are arising out of climate change. And let me just quote this number. The World Bank's latest study refers to an estimated number of 62 million people across South Asia who are actually likely to be pushed below extreme poverty lines by the year 2030 as a result of climate change-related disruptions. Now, what exactly is this disruption, and how does one connect to it from a business perspective? I think what we are getting to see is very erratic, irregular weather patterns coming in through not just melting of the glacial snow, but also flash floods, cloud bursts, and related developments leading to a rise in the sea levels around the coast. Large number of coastal cities of the region are on threat of flooding. And what this means is that the number of natural disasters have increased proportionally as opposed to what they were 5 years ago, leaving the communities and the regions little time to recover before the next disaster is onsetting. And this is a very serious challenge where public policy is still found relatively short, and this has implications for business. The final point on the final challenge, which the thought that I would like to leave you with is that we know remittances are extremely important from South Asia. For several countries, remittances have continued to remain steady inflows, notwithstanding the disruptions in trade. For Bangladesh, it's about 5% of the GDP. It's even more so for Pakistan. For Nepal, it's a staggering almost 1/3 of the Nepalese GDP, the remittances. The remittances have been steady. They have supported the households. They have lifted people out of poverty. But the problem over here is that if one looks at the fact that South Asian countries are trying to improve the ease with which one can start a business, the next question that comes is, how do these startups access finance? And that is where the region, aside of India, continues to suffer from the lack of a well-developed, cohesive, modern capital market infrastructure. The equity markets and the long-term debt markets have not developed substantially, as a result of which many startups continue to remain dependent on private sources of finance, which are principally informal. And they continue to go down the tunnel which people would ideally want to avoid in order to avoid debt traps. So this continues to remain a major challenge for the region. So as to develop the infrastructure, we can tap into the physical savings and bring them into formal savings, which can be utilized by entrepreneurs and startups going ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. And I now invite Dr. Pang Yee Ean to address us.
Thank you, Chairman. Very good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to report on the AIIB status as a start. We are proud that AIIB, since its third year, in its third year of formation, has already have 100 members, and so we are truly a multilateral development bank as what we aim to be. That includes all the South Asian countries with the exclusion of Bhutan. So all the members of South Asia are an important part of our infrastructure push. Being in AIIB, we have placed a lot of emphasis on the infrastructure development of South Asia. Just to report, we have $10 billion worth of commitment to all our members, and 4.8 goes to South Asian countries, which is almost half. And as we are talking, within the next 1.5 months, we will see another 580 million committed to South Asian countries. So we see a lot that we need to do in South Asia. Our results is not just our effort, but also it illustrates the gap in infrastructure that presents itself. But we are very happy with the preparedness and the quality of infrastructure projects that is up for financing by the AIIB. So just to name a few, we have rural road projects in India, and these are very challenging projects, and we are glad to have good partners helping us with them. We have different tools deployed in India, like investment funds. We have our bond working on them as well. In Bangladesh, we have helped 25 million rural population with providing them with electricity connection. We have been working on natural gas work. We have been doing municipal sanitation and so on and so forth. In Pakistan, we have done hydro projects. We have done roadway projects. In Sri Lanka, we have done urban regeneration projects. We have done also landslide risk mitigation projects. And in Nepal, even a country in Nepal which is quite tedious for infrastructure, we have done hydro projects, we have done distribution and transmission projects as well. So it's a big variety of involvement that we do in South Asia. We see a lot of exciting projects coming up. In South Asia, we notice as a multilateral development bank, the the gross fixed asset formation as portion to GDP still range between 20% to 30, just past 30%. That compared against, say, China, the fixed asset formation is in the range of high 30s and even entering 40%. Therefore, we are worried about the gap that presents itself for South Asia. So we see a lot of infrastructure opportunity. SM Teo mentioned about the 700 over billion worth of US dollars worth of project every year. We don't see that materializing, and we hope that we all work together to bring that to fruition. Going back to AIIB, if you don't remember anything that I've said, I hope you remember that we have a mantra that we chant in AIIB: lean, clean, and green. We are very committed to the Paris climate change agreements. So green is an important part for us. We want to promote sustainability development in South Asia. Clean, we are very committed to fraud prevention in infrastructure project. And very important is the lean portion. As AIIB, we have taken a different perspective from our big brothers like World Bank, Asian Development Bank. We decided to keep ourselves very lean so that we run faster. We convert projects to financing faster. We're able to deliver the impact faster by concentrating our expertise, by making our approval process very simple. But that presents a challenge. We have not got enough ground contact at the respective countries, and therefore we look towards folks like yourself in the private sector, identifying projects for us, working out the projects for us, and we're even looking at the academia. I was just talking to Amit that the reports that ISAS has produced, we keep track of them diligently. We're very impressed by the analysis that you make. So folks, let's work together, and we hope to present an even greater infrastructure landscape in South Asia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. We have some time, so I will throw open the discussion for questions from the floor. Please make your questions brief, and you can address it to any member of the panel.
Hello. My question is for Mr. Enayetullah. You talked about business, you talked about conservation, you talked about biodiversity. So I'm going to reference again to the report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services that says that, the lives and survival of 100 million species is at risk. Now, environment is also a service sector, and generally when we talk about businesses, we only refer to the economic side of it. But ecological goods and services are also very important. How can the South Asian diaspora go beyond its political differences and find a way to agree on nature-based solutions that can improve the socioeconomic indicators of the region as a whole? Thank you.
Thank you, Aisha. I love your question because I think about the challenges that each and every one of us facing in today's world. If you look at the newspaper, at least 20% space is going to be about a climate change situation. Unfortunately, climate change is a global issue, and there's no easy solution because climate change do not have a political boundary lines. You see, it impacts people across the boundary line, political boundary lines. So, if I have understood your question, that how South Asia can cope up with these huge challenges that Dr. Palit also mentioned. I think time has arrived that we forget our political and other geopolitical interest and address these climate change challenges unitedly. And in every crisis, I believe there's an opportunity. So I'm very optimistic that South Asia will, as a region, I say the United States of South Asia. That's my dream, that all the South Asian countries, a senior minister was saying that inter-country or intra-country trading among South Asia is one of the lowest in the world. It was 2%, but I was very glad to hear that it has come up to 4%. Whereas if you compare it to other regions in the world, it's much, much higher. So we need to work together to tackle these, climate change problems. I'm not an expert. I'm not a scientist, but I'm a conservationist, and I'm also the founder of the Bangladesh, wildlife. But we find these continuous challenges, and even the government of the day, the Ministry of Environment, they think in a different way. We think in a slightly different way. But I think there could be a convergence. There could be a common strategy. I think this is one of the challenges that we can take it up. Thank you.
Next question. If there are no questions coming, maybe I can pose the question to Jonathan. Sorry? Okay.
Good afternoon to the panel. My name is Himanshu Verma. I represent a company called Connected to India. Incidentally, also a partner with the South Asian Diaspora Convention. My two questions. First is to Jonathan. What were your initial reactions when the state of Andhra Pradesh pulled out of the Amravati project? And how do you start viewing the country as an investment destination? And the second question is to the entire panel. What do people at leadership positions like yourself think about empowering and unleashing the potential of the second half of our population, which is the women population? How intensely do you discuss that? How can we make women more freer to work and unleash that potential? I mean, you look at this convention also, since morning it's been a boys' club. I don't see any women on that panel just now. In the second half, you've got a empowerment of women panel. I mean, I don't personally like the word empowerment. Who are we to empower? So talk about that. How much of that is discussed? Because it is much required, and the kind of potential, if you can, one can learn from Singapore, it's quite a lot. So please.
Thank you for your question. I guess, as I said earlier, India is the world's largest democracy and is unique in the sense that you have a central government that is obviously run by different political parties from state government. So we've been in India for 25 years. So I guess while we probably didn't like what has happened, but at the same time, I also can't say that it's not entirely unexpected. So I guess it's a mixture of, unfortunately, whatever we thought we need to think about for risk management has indeed happened. So I think the fortunate thing for us is, in the first place, when we structured the investment, we obviously took that risk into consideration and take the necessary measures and steps to make sure that we take calibrated position as we go along. So notwithstanding this has happened, I don't think it will change our view about India. We remain excited about India, and clearly we want to do a lot more in India. I can tell you the targets we set internally is much bigger, but at the same time, I'm also mindful that India, as far as dollar value is concerned, compared to some of the markets we're in, obviously the dollar value is a little bit smaller. So we can do a lot more in terms of square footage to even get to the number we're looking for. But I would repeat that notwithstanding this episode, it doesn't change our focus nor interest in India. As far as women is concerned, I think it is important. I think important not just because it's form half of the workforce. It's also important because obviously it forms a big part of a consumer base. And to some extent, maybe sometimes the more important decision makers in most of our families, whether it's mother or wives. So to us, it's important. So it's something that we obviously push really hard internally to make sure that whether it's male or female, what we really are pushing for is diversity within the team. But we also accept that while we want to push this, it takes time for us to get there. But clearly, it is a very important topic internally and is often discussed at our HR committee.
Next question.
Hello. Good afternoon, panels. My name is Han Rong, and I'm a business student from Singapore Polytechnic. It has been about 5 months of protests in Hong Kong pertaining to various policy, and one of the reasons that caused this outbreak is linked to unaffordable housing. May I know what can Singapore and other countries like India learn from this, and what can be done to overcome such societal problem when things go south on top of current policies? Thank you.
I was hoping for a Singapore perspective, but can I offer the AIIB perspective first? And a Singaporean who is very committed to affordable housing in my previous part of my life. First, in the South Asian context, we do see a very high urbanization rate that is going on in the cities, and this is not met by a corresponding increase in the housing requirement. And but I think the countries are already concerned themselves with this. For example, in India, in 2 weeks' time, I will be in India talking to the ministries related for its 75 cities affordable housing plan. All right, the affordable housing requirements in India is very large, and this presents an opportunity for Singapore companies to be involved. The affordable housing is not going to be the similar model as Singapore. I think let's be realistic. World Bank and ourselves have always analyzed the affordable housing requirements of South Asia and other countries, and we find that only about 2 or 3 countries could really implement the Singapore model, which is quite unique. So we hope to do more of this affordable housing. It is an important part of our program. Thank you.
Hello. Hi. Good afternoon, panelists. My name is Srisha. I'm from India, currently working as a business journalist at Mint. So my question is more to do with the global financial uncertainty and the trade wars that we have seen. And it does have an impact on the overall economy of South Asia, where we have, private consumption dipping, manufacturing contracting. So we have seen a steady decrease in imports and industrial production, of the sectors in various countries. And also governments, specifically in India, they have taken some, monetary and economic stimulus measures to revive consumption growth and, up the investment, which of course hasn't been enough. So I just would like to know your perspective, or rather what sort of intra-nation, measures that could work probably in the larger South Asian context to, rebound the growth and, not defeat, but at least stall or lessen the impact of the current slowdown. Thank you.
Let me try to separate 2 parts of the question that you answered. The first is the global and regional developments in terms of the trade war and the disruptions it's causing in a large number of economic areas. And this as opposed to what might be going on in a large number of South Asian countries, not all, with respect to a general slowdown in economy. The first part, and this is about a year and a half when we saw the US-China trade war emerging, that hasn't got over. though there are possibilities of the two countries reaching some sort of an agreement, but it's something which is going to get prolonged because the issues are very deep down between the comparative advantages of the two countries when it comes to technological excellence and the struggle to maintain the lead in technology-driven industries. South Asian countries have, at the short term, in a sporadic fashion, benefited from it because there are studies which have shown that there have been import substitutions which have been happening. And there are some countries in the region which have been able to benefit from that, including, interestingly, let's say, for example, a country like Pakistan, which has experienced an increase in medical and surgical equipment exports. And there are also some benefits that have been experienced by Sri Lanka, partly by India. But in the long term, it no longer remains a question of import substitution. It becomes a question of trying to get a part of the supply chains that are being relocated, and that depend on a host of other factors. There is the possibility, a lot of analysts are talking about Vietnam being one of the biggest beneficiaries of the US-China trade war relocation. But then Vietnam is also running into difficulties with respect to availability of skilled labor. There are saturation issues being encountered there. So it's not that opportunities don't exist. They do. How they do, in which sectors and in what ways is actually difficult to predict. There's probably no generalized answer to that. Coming to the second question of economic growth slowdown, I think it's important to note that it's not happening entirely across the region in a uniform pattern. There is slowdown in India, but Bangladesh is going at the rate of 8% plus. And there are other countries in the region which are probably experiencing fairly decent rates of growth given the global standards. Maybe what is happening in India till now is a question of the cyclical factors combined with structural factors. It will probably take more time to figure out to what extent these factors can be acted upon to improve the scenario. But I suppose to an extent for governments, the options are somewhat limited, particularly for an economy like India, which has shifted more towards a welfare-centric populist model of development, which entails huge expenditure by the state. The opportunities are limited insofar as the flexibilities they have in creating new growth mechanisms.
We have time for one more question.
Yeah, hi, my name is Jacqueline. So I want to ask Jonathan this question. The question is, of course, I do buy and I do own CapitaLand shares. However, with many Singaporeans very well invested in real estate, with your wealth of knowledge in real estate altogether, what is a good portfolio of investment to behold in this? And more typically, a good question is, of course, when is a good time to buy a property in Singapore? Thank you.
Jonathan, you want to answer that?
Sure, thank you for the question. I thought it's a South Asia conference. Well, the quick answer is buy CapitaLand share and buy any of the 8 CapitaLand REITs. Wow, thank you. I think ultimately investment is a function of what really objective is. But personally, I take long-term objective. And for me, I like real estate, not because it happened to be my profession, but I really think it's a good investment class. And with the introduction of REITs, whether it's in Singapore, in the region, or even in US, Australia, it does give an alternative to invest in more liquid form of real estate other than just in the form of, say, hard physical assets, which can be chunky. And therefore, as a result, sometimes you buy an apartment in Singapore now, obviously it runs to millions of dollars. Whereas REITs, you can own it in multiple form. And of course, there are also property counters that are readily available, whether it's this part of the world or elsewhere. And it does give a very liquid option for you to buy and sell any point in time. I'm not sure, again, is this a question for your daughter that is in the crowd, as I noticed earlier? But I would say, obviously, it's up to your objective. And I do think markets come in cycle. It boils down to whether or not it's a pool of capital that you can afford to take some risk. If it is, then obviously take the options that you think make sense. Or as a pool of capital, you don't want to think too much about it. Find a good REIT, for instance, put the money in there and just let it run on its own. Or find a good property counter and just put the money in there and let it run on its own. And ultimately, even everything else goes wrong, at least you have a portfolio of hard assets, which does carry value. And by and large, REITs are well regulated by the regulators. There are limits on your gearing levels and so on. It does kind of, in a way, limit the risk, the exposure to the risk that you're taking. Hopefully that answers your question. If you have other questions, you probably can take it offline.
Thank you, Jonathan. Otherwise, it will become a session on stock market pricing. I think we have come to the end of this session. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the panelists for their insightful remarks, and thank you all for joining us. Can we all show our appreciation to the panelists in the usual manner?